Jimmy would tell a joke. It would take Brando 3 seconds to catch on, and he would go like that.
Robert Duvall, one of the most respected actors of his generation, stayed quiet for decades until he finally revealed the names of the people he could never stand working with. And one name in particular shocked everyone. Join us as we uncover what happened behind closed doors. Dustin Hoffman. Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman began their careers in a setting that hardly resembled the bright world they would one day enter. In the early 1960s, both men were young, broke, and determined to find a place in New York's competitive theater scene. They lived in a cramped apartment that was more a temporary base than a comfortable home. The rooms were small, the walls were thin, and money was always tight. But it was the kind of space where hope felt real, because everyone inside it was trying to break into something bigger. They spent their days running to auditions, taking acting classes, and working whatever jobs they could find. Stage training was intense, and every role, no matter how small, felt like a possible turning point. Both actors had big dreams, but the obstacles were constant. There were weeks when neither of them booked anything at all. There were months when the rent seemed impossible. Still, they stayed focused. Their early bond formed through shared struggle. They were two young actors chasing the same dream and facing the same daily grind. Duvall remembered that time as one filled with long talks, shared meals, and thousands of hours of practice. They helped each other rehearse lines and build characters. Friendship grew out of necessity, but also out of genuine respect. When both men were unknown and scraping by, they felt like partners on the same road. While their personalities were different, their ambition brought them together. This early friendship made what came later feel much heavier to Duvall, because it started from what seemed like trust. Duvall described a pattern that bothered him for years. He said he would work weeks on a certain approach to a role, building a specific voice, gesture, or rhythm, and rehearse it out loud in the apartment. Then, according to him, Hoffman would audition for the same part and use the same choices he had heard Duvall practicing. Duvall didn't see this as inspiration or collaboration. He saw it as borrowing without acknowledgement, especially when Hoffman got parts using ideas he believed he had developed first. It created a quiet frustration that he kept to himself at the time. He wanted to believe they were still partners in the struggle, but it was hard to ignore the feeling that his work wasn't staying his own. This frustration grew as their careers expanded. When both actors reached Hollywood, Duvall felt the pattern continued in different ways. Even as they became better known and their projects became bigger, he felt that Hoffman still reached for his ideas or guidance without openly giving credit. What might have been a small annoyance between roommates became, over time, something larger and more personal. The next key moment came in the late 1960s when Duvall was filming True Grit while Hoffman was working on Midnight Cowboy. Their careers were taking off, but they still kept in touch. Duvall recalled late-night phone calls where Hoffman asked for help with voice work for his character Ratso Rizzo. Duvall said he spent hours helping him shape the sound and style of the role. But when Midnight Cowboy came out, Hoffman gave a public interview saying he developed the character's voice by studying homeless people in New York for months. In Duvall's memory of events, this was painful. He felt erased from a process he believed he had helped shape. To him, it wasn't just about credit. It was about honesty between two people who had once trusted each other. That interview became a turning point. Duvall felt that this was no longer a misunderstanding or coincidence. It felt like a pattern that had followed them from New York to Hollywood and now played out on a much bigger stage. This was the moment when the idea of Hoffman borrowing stopped feeling harmless and became something Duvall couldn't ignore anymore. Next, the casting process for The French Connection. Both Hoffman and Duvall were being considered for the lead role, though it eventually went to Gene Hackman. Duvall later heard that Hoffman told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative based on their early theater days. Duvall claimed that Friedkin confirmed this to him directly years later. For Duvall, this crossed a line. If the earlier issues felt like creative conflicts, this felt like something more deliberate. He saw it as sabotage, something done behind closed doors that had real consequences for his career. Whether or not Hoffman saw it that way, Duvall believed the comment cost him a role that could have changed his trajectory. This was when Duvall decided to end contact with Hoffman. He said he stopped taking his calls and no longer wanted to take part in any relationship with him, professional or personal. The sense of betrayal was too deep. What had started as a friendly rivalry between two young actors in New York had grown into a broken relationship, marked by disappointment and distrust. Despite all this, for many years the public saw no sign of conflict between them. Hollywood events, interviews, and award shows put them on the same stages, and both men stayed polite. They spoke kindly about each other in public and acted as if nothing was wrong. This facade lasted for decades. Because of this steady public calm, Duvall's eventual comments about Hoffman shocked many in the industry. People had no reason to suspect tension. They had always appeared friendly, even supportive. The revelation added a new layer to how people viewed their long careers, especially when considering how their early lives intertwined. Their unresolved conflict also highlights something bigger about Hollywood. Many actors who rise to leading roles start as character actors fighting for every job they can get. That kind of competition can be intense, especially when two people are on similar paths. Things only get more intense when the next name on Duvall's list enters the picture. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando stands at the center of a huge contrast. On one side is the public myth of Brando, the man many call the greatest actor to ever step in front of a camera. His performances were studied in schools, copied by younger actors, and praised by critics for decades. People saw him as a force of nature, someone who brought a new kind of emotional truth to acting. For many in Hollywood, he symbolized the height of creative power. That is why Robert Duvall's comments about him felt so shocking. When Duvall described Brando as the most destructive ego I ever encountered, it hit the industry hard. Brando had been criticized for being difficult before, but the intensity of Duvall's words surprised even people who had worked around Brando. The idea that someone as respected as Duvall would speak that strongly made people pay attention. It challenged the perfect image many held of Brando and opened a door into a side of him that wasn't widely discussed. Duvall didn't deny Brando's talent. He acknowledged his brilliance openly, but he also described a different reality behind the scenes, one filled with tension and behavior that Duvall believed crossed professional lines. That contrast, respect for the art and frustration with the person, is what makes this part so striking. The center of their conflict is on the set of The Chase in 1966. Even though the film is not well remembered today, it had an impressive cast, including Jane Fonda, Robert Redford, and Brando himself. But behind the camera, things were far from smooth. The production was difficult, with a lot of chaos mixed with emotional power struggles. Duvall claimed that Brando had a habit of changing his performance from take to take in ways that were unpredictable. This wasn't about experimenting with the scene. He did it deliberately when he didn't agree with the director's vision. A character's movement or delivery might shift completely. This made it very hard for editors to maintain continuity. It also made it harder for co-stars like Duvall, who had to adjust constantly. This behavior wasn't limited to Brando exploring choices. Duvall believed it was a form of control. When Brando didn't like how something was going, he changed his acting in a way that messed up the rhythm of the entire scene. For other actors, staying grounded in a moment became exhausting. It created a tense atmosphere where no one knew if the next take would match the last one. This lack of consistency affected timing, interactions, and even the emotional weight of scenes. The set was a kind of psychological battleground. Actors were trying to do their best work while also dealing with sudden shifts that felt designed to throw them off. It built frustration, especially for Duvall, who valued discipline and structure. By the time the film was halfway through, the pressure was clear. Duvall felt Brando's behavior was not just difficult, but harmful to the production itself. Everything reached a turning point during a major monologue Duvall had in the film. This moment mattered to him professionally. He wanted to deliver a strong performance, and he needed focus and quiet to do it. But during his takes, he began to notice small noises coming from off-camera. They were subtle sounds, barely audible to people in the room, but clear enough for microphones to pick up. These interruptions forced multiple retakes. Duvall realized the noises were coming from Brando. They were not loud or obvious. They were just enough to ruin the audio. Duvall saw this as intentional, especially because it kept happening. After several takes were lost, he confronted Brando. Brando didn't respond with regret or surprise. He simply smiled and told Duvall that maybe he should be stronger in his choices. For Duvall, this moment defined everything. He believed Brando was sabotaging the scene and then framing the problem as Duvall's weakness. It added a personal sting to what had already been a difficult experience. This incident stayed with Duvall for decades, shaping how he viewed Brando not just as an actor, but as a colleague. It turned a general frustration into something deeper and more personal. After that confrontation, Duvall saw Brando through a new lens. He felt that Brando understood exactly how much influence he had on set, and he used it in ways that hurt others. When Brando suggested that the ruined takes were a result of Duvall's own lack of strength, it shifted the conflict from a simple disagreement into something sharper. In Duvall's account, this was a lesson in how ego could shape a production. He believed that Brando knew he could disrupt scenes and still walk away untouched because of his reputation. Duvall described it as a form of psychological power, a way of bending the environment to fit his own preferences. It wasn't loud or aggressive, it was subtle and controlled. This moment changed how Duvall viewed authority in acting. He realized that talent didn't always come with kindness. He also understood that admiration for someone's work didn't erase the emotional effect of their behavior. This was one of the hardest truths he took away from the chase. Even with all of these experiences, Duvall did not speak publicly about his issues with Brando for a very long time. In interviews, he often praised Brando's skill and said he had learned a lot from watching him work. This public respect covered the bitterness he still carried privately. There were many reasons for this silence. One was professional courtesy. Another was the high regard in which Brando was held. Speaking out against someone so respected wasn't something Duvall wanted to do while their careers overlapped. It was easier to maintain peace than to start a conflict that might overshadow the work. And just when you think the tension can't get any sharper, the next name on Duvall's list brings a whole new kind of conflict: James Caan. The tension between Robert Duvall and James Caan starts long before cameras roll. It begins in the rehearsal rooms of The Godfather, when the cast is first trying to find the shape of their characters. The film brings together a powerful ensemble: Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, James Caan, Robert Duvall, and others. Everyone knows this project could be big. That knowledge creates excitement, but it also raises the stakes for every actor in the room. Rehearsals are charged with energy. Each actor wants to stand out, but also has to respect the group. That kind of setting can create a quiet competition underneath the teamwork. For Duvall, who plays Tom Hagen, the adopted son and consigliere, the approach is calm, careful, and internal. He focuses on small details, stillness, and subtle shifts in expression. His style fits the character, a man who thinks before he speaks and weighs every word. James Caan, on the other hand, plays Sonny Corleone, the hot-headed eldest son. The role demands fire, speed, and emotional outbursts. Caan brings a loud, physical, high-energy presence into rehearsals. He talks with his hands, moves a lot, and takes up space in the room. This is not wrong for the character, but it sets him up as a sharp contrast to Duvall's quiet, controlled energy. The clash begins here. Duvall's measured style and Caan's explosive approach both serve the film, but they also create friction. The more intense rehearsals become, the more this difference stands out. What looks like perfect casting on screen also becomes the foundation of a private rivalry behind it. Duvall describes Caan as competitive to the point of malice. That does not mean open attacks or fights, but small choices that, in Duvall's view, are meant to pull focus away from others. He recalls moments where, during important scenes, Caan would move in ways that drew the eye, even when he was not the main focus of the shot. Caan would use his hands, facial expressions, or sudden bits of business to grab attention. A gesture here, a shift there, a bigger reaction than needed. None of these things are openly hostile, but over time, Duvall sees a pattern. When he has a key line or subtle emotional beat, something from Caan suddenly grows louder in the frame. It feels to Duvall like a continuous effort to stay at the center of every moment. For Duvall, this makes it harder to stay fully inside his character. Tom Hagen is not a loud man. He is an observer. He watches, listens, and then speaks with care. But acting in scenes with someone who is always pushing to outshine everyone else makes that quiet approach more fragile. Duvall feels he has to fight just to keep the character's presence strong, even though Hagen's power is supposed to come from stillness and thought. Underneath the surface, professional jealousy starts to build. Khan's Sonny is flashy and emotional, the kind of role that grabs attention in clips and trailers. Duvall's Hagen is more restrained, the kind of role that may be overlooked by casual viewers but deeply valued by serious fans. This imbalance can sting, especially in an environment where everyone knows awards, reviews, and future roles can hinge on how memorable each performance appears. The film's ensemble looks united from the outside. Inside, Duvall feels there is a quiet struggle happening, harmony in public, competition in private. And in that competition, he sees Khan playing to win every time. One of the most famous scenes in The Godfather is the family meeting, where the Corleones debate whether to go to war. It is loaded with tension, power shifts, and emotional stakes. This scene becomes a perfect example of how the rivalry between Duvall and Khan plays out. Duvall, wanting to deepen his understanding of Tom Hagen, talks privately with director Francis Ford Coppola. They discuss Hagen's motives, his loyalties, and how he would think about the family's choices. These talks are meant to refine the performance and give more weight to Hagen's presence in that key moment. Duvall takes this kind of preparation seriously. James Caan interrupts one of these quiet talks with a mocking remark. He brushes off the discussion by calling Hagen a glorified secretary, downplaying the importance of the character and, by extension, Duvall's work. For Duvall, this comment cuts deep. It feels disrespectful, not just to him personally, but to the craft he brings to the role. That moment becomes a turning point. Duvall decides that he and Caan will never be friends. At the same time, he chooses to use that feeling in his performance. From then on, he leans into the idea that Hagen is always watching Sonny closely, not just as a brother in arms, but as someone who has to manage a dangerous hothead. This choice adds tension to every scene they share. Hagen's eyes on Sonny become more focused, more cautious. He studies him, measures him, and waits for the right time to speak. What begins as resentment off camera turns into fuel for a stronger, sharper portrayal on camera. The audience sees a believable relationship between a calm advisor and an impulsive leader, without knowing the real emotion behind it. After the film's success, Caan and Duvall enter a new phase. Life as co-stars in one of the most beloved movies ever made. That means press tours, interviews, photo shoots, and later reunions and anniversary events. At all of these, they stand side by side as part of a legendary team. They both understand that The Godfather is bigger than their personal issues. The movie's reputation, the fans' love, and the industry's respect all depend on keeping its image clean and united. So, in public, they smile, they tell stories, they laugh about old days on set. They give the impression of brotherhood that matches what viewers see on screen. The quiet hostility stays hidden. Duvall does not show his resentment. Caan does not show any regret. They both play their roles, not as characters this time, but as professionals protecting something important. Their personal conflict never becomes a public feud, and the film's legacy remains untouched. This shared professionalism keeps the focus where it belongs, on the work. It also explains why Duvall's later comments surprised so many people. For years, no one had any reason to suspect that the warmth they saw was only one side of the story. What stands out is that Duvall's issues with Caan do not carry the same feeling of deep betrayal that he connects to others on his list. With Caan, the problem seems rooted in competition more than anything else. He sees him as someone who pushes too hard to win every moment, who tries to dominate the frame, but not as someone who tried to destroy him behind the scenes. That difference matters. It explains why, even though he never saw Caan as a friend, Duvall was able to keep working beside him without breaking. Their relationship is tense, but it is still controlled. The dislike never becomes open hatred. It remains a simmering, steady distance. Their fractured relationship shows how two strong actors can clash in style and ego, yet still create something unforgettable when the camera rolls. And as sharp as things were with Caan, the next name on Duvall's list takes the conflict into a very different and even more personal direction. Robert Redford. Robert Redford is the name that really stuns people when Duvall finally names names. That's because Redford has long carried a very specific public image. For decades, audiences and many in the industry have seen him as thoughtful, principled, polite, and generous. He's not only known as a star, but also as someone who supports independent film, cares about social issues, and speaks often about artistic integrity. Because of that, when Duvall calls him the fraud behind the golden image, it hits differently than his complaints about the others. With Brando, people already knew he could be difficult. With Khan, the idea of competitive behavior doesn't feel impossible. But Redford is the one whose reputation is almost spotless. He is the golden boy, the reliable symbol of grace and class. So when Duvall describes him as calculating, self-serving, and dismissive of others, it cuts into something deeper. It challenges not only Redford as a person, but also the entire idea that public image can be trusted. That is why Duvall's comments about Redford feel like the most explosive. They don't just question a man, they question a myth. The conflict begins on the set of The Natural, where Redford plays legendary baseball hero Roy Hobbs and Duvall plays journalist Max Mercy. On paper, it should have been a strong pairing, a major star and a respected character actor bringing depth and tension to a classic sports story. According to Duvall's account, the first cracks appear not in big blow-ups, but in small patterns. He notices how Redford treats the crew. While Duvall arrives prepared and ready to work, focused on the day's scenes, he sees Redford keeping the entire set waiting. Not because he is rehearsing or locked into character, but because he is on the phone dealing with business matters. These delays affect everyone. Lights are set, cameras are ready, extras are in place, and yet time passes with nothing being shot. For crew members, time is money and energy. For actors like Duvall, long waits can drain focus and take them out of the emotional space they need. Duvall reads this behavior not as necessary responsibility, but as disregard. He feels there is a gap between how Redford presents himself in public, serious, committed, respectful of the craft, and the way he behaves on set, where others are left standing around while he attends to his own priorities. Over time, this difference bothers Duvall more and more. The set of The Natural is already carrying high expectations. With a beloved story and a major star, that pressure makes every delay and every slight feel heavier. Resentment builds quietly. Duvall believes Redford went beyond on-set behavior and moved into private influence. Redford allegedly pressured director Barry Levinson to cut down Duvall's role in the film. The scenes that Duvall says were targeted were not random. They were key confrontations, especially ones where Max Mercy challenged Roy Hobbs or chipped away at his heroic image. In other words, these were moments that made the story more complex, where Hobbs wasn't just a mythic figure but a man who could be questioned, doubted, or exposed. Duvall's claim is that Redford did not want those scenes to have too much weight. He did not want another strong presence on screen that might shift the balance or share the spotlight. So Redford pushes to trim or soften those scenes under the argument that they are unnecessary or slow down the film. This is where the story becomes especially pointed. The film itself deals with myth-making and truth. Max Mercy, Duvall's character, is the one who can break the perfect picture of Roy Hobbs. If the journalist's role is reduced, the myth stands mostly untouched. This mirrors what Duvall feels is happening off-screen. The protection of Redford's image at the expense of depth and honesty. At the heart of Duvall's issue with Redford is not just personal conflict. It is the gap he believes exists between Redford's public persona and his private behavior. Publicly, Redford is known as a supporter of independent filmmakers, a founder of Sundance, and a symbol of artistic purity. He speaks about giving power to new voices, protecting the art, and respecting stories. Privately, in Duvall's telling, he sees someone different, someone who delays filming to handle business deals, someone who, he claims, pressures directors to shape films in ways that favor him, someone who wants control over who is cast and how big their parts are, someone who, in Duvall's view, treats crew members like background and other actors like threats rather than partners. There's a sharp line between the messages Redford sends at events like Sundance about collaboration, risk, and truth, and the controlling, self-focused behavior Duvall believes he saw on set. For Duvall, this isn't just regular ego. It feels like hypocrisy, and that makes it harder for him to accept. To him, it is not only that Redford wants to be the star, it is that he publicly promotes one set of values while privately living by another. That is why he uses such strong language, calling him the fraud behind the golden image. It is not about talent, it is about trust. The emotional peak comes during post-production on The Natural. This is the phase where a film truly takes shape. Scenes are cut, trimmed, or rearranged. Performances are strengthened or softened by what is kept and what is removed. Redford does not deny his power. He does not soften his response or pretend that everyone is equal in this system. Instead, he delivers a single line that Duvall never forgets. "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." For Duvall, this sentence confirms everything he has been feeling. It shows that Redford sees hierarchy as normal and fixed. It suggests that Redford believes his needs and image matter more than anyone else's. It turns what might have been a disagreement over cuts into a clear statement about status. That is why Redford's place on the list feels so strong. It is not just about a bad experience on a film. It is about what happens when the mask of perfection slips, even for a moment. If you enjoyed this video and want more stories like it, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.